Paul McCartney and John Lennon were not only legendary songwriting partners, but also shared a deep personal bond, confiding in each other about their most personal struggles. Their friendship began in 1957 when they met at a church fair and quickly connected over a shared passion for rock and roll. But beyond music, they discovered mutual experiences of loss and fractured family backgrounds. McCartney had lost his mother at the age of 14, while Lennon had been placed in the care of his Aunt Mimi as a young child after his parents separated. Tragically, when Lennon was 16, his mother Julia was killed by a car. As their friendship deepened, Lennon confided in McCartney about his sense of being cursed, particularly when it came to the men in his family. Though McCartney had been raised in relatively stable circumstances by his aunt and uncle in a middle-class household, he was fully aware of the emotional scars Lennon carried from his chaotic upbringing. McCartney once recalled during an interview with Howard Stern that he had known about the abandonment Lennon experienced when his father left the family, and how that painful history haunted his friend. Lennon had once told McCartney he feared he was somehow cursed when it came to the male members of his family, pointing to the death of his uncle after raising him and the early disappearance of his father. In response, McCartney had felt the need to reassure Lennon that none of it had been his fault and tried to gently push back against his friend's self-blame. He described having to talk Lennon out of that belief, reminding him that he wasn't responsible for the actions of others. McCartney believed Lennon's troubled childhood was a major factor behind the emotional intensity he displayed later in life. He pointed out that after being abandoned by his father and later losing his mother, Lennon had to endure the uncomfortable situation of his estranged father reappearing years later, seeking money. McCartney suggested this compounded Lennon's feelings of hurt and betrayal and contributed to the frustration and inner conflict he often expressed. This inner turmoil was reflected in Lennon's songwriting, particularly in tracks like Help. McCartney recalled that during their collaborative process, there wasn't much visible vulnerability between them. They were friends focused on their creativity. But he remembered Lennon beginning the lyrics with a reference to feeling younger and more confident in the past, which hinted at something deeper. At the time, they had simply seen the song as another strong addition to their catalog. It was only much later, McCartney admitted, that he recognized the track as a sincere emotional outpouring, Lennon's subtle but powerful way of reaching out. In another discussion on the McCartney, A Life in Lyrics podcast, the singer reflected on how Lennon's difficult upbringing had shaped his personality. He explained that Lennon developed a strong, protective exterior, one that relied heavily on sharp wit and sarcasm as a coping mechanism. McCartney believed this tendency to hide behind humor was similar to how many comedians deal with personal pain. Despite the emotional armor Lennon wore, McCartney appreciated this facet of his bandmate's personality. He acknowledged that the sarcasm and quick comebacks were often how they both dealt with personal losses, including his own grief after his mother's passing. For McCartney, Lennon's humor wasn't just a defense. It was part of what made him magnetic and endearing, even if it was born from hardship